The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is a game that I love to death and have invested well over 1,000 hours into both on the PC and on the Xbox 360. I love the gameplay, I love the world space, and the province of Skyrim we get to explore in itself, as well as the overall Nordic theme of the game. But you know what they say, we criticize the things that we love, and as much as I love Skyrim, there are things that I felt the game could have done better, which Bethesda now has the chance to rectify with The Elder Scrolls VI. Like most people, I was filled to the brim with excitement at the announcement of The Elder Scrolls VI at Bethesda's E3 conference this year. I literally got shivers going up my spine from watching the 30-second clip of some mountains and a coastline. However, even though we know the game is in pre-production, which is the stage of game development that involves concept art and brainstorming ideas for content and the storyline of the game, we're still going to be at the very least 3 years away from its release. Probably more than that, depending on how long it takes Bethesda to complete and release Starfield, its brand new IP, which I'm also pretty excited about. But what that means is that we've got plenty of time to speculate on where the game will be set and how much things will have changed between Skyrim and this new game. What it also means is that Bethesda will have lots of time to work on the game and make it the best game they possibly can. So without further ado, these are the top 5 things that I want to see The Elder Scrolls VI improve over The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Number 5. Better magic. If it's one thing that Skyrim got wrong, it was how it kind of guided the player into the role of a stealth archer. Between the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood, 2 of the 4 secondary factions that you could join outside of the Legion and the Stormcloaks, you're really encouraged to follow skills like archery and sneak. Leveling both to 100 and getting all the perks makes you an unstoppable force as most of the enemies in the game become a breeze to defeat. And melee isn't too bad, but it's mages who really suffer. The amount of magicka that's consumed when casting spells, even when you're high level, makes using magic incredibly difficult, and thus unappealing to play. Even if you have all of the perks and master level spells, you'll run out of magicka dealing with just a single enemy sometimes, and downing magicka potions to make up for that kind of takes you out of the gameplay. Add into that the College of Winterhold questline, which is painfully underwhelming and underwritten, and you've got a recipe for a playstyle that just really isn't all that fun. But for The Elder Scrolls VI, we need to fix that. Don't pigeonhole players into the path that's easiest to play. All 3 combat styles should have their upsides and downsides. Don't make archers the easiest class to play as, but also introduce more spells for the player to use. Skyrim spells are painfully lacking in the awesome factor, and I can only cast fireballs and lightning bolts out of my hand so many times before I get bored of seeing the same old particle effects over and over and over again. Why not bring back the spellcrafting system from Oblivion? At least then we can mix and match different effects and create unique spells for ourselves. It's like how when you enchant weapons and armor in Skyrim, you can rename them to give them your own sort of personal touch. We should be able to do this with magic too. Give players who like to play as mages a good reason to choose that style of play. Make it fun, balance it out, give us more spells, and write a better story for whichever magic faction we join in the game. Number 4. Better side quests. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt really set a standard for open world games going forward when it comes to side quests and choices. It's going to go down as the game that all other sandboxes are judged by, and while The Witcher and The Elder Scrolls are very different gameplay-wise as well as in the fantasy worlds that they're set in, there's no excuse why The Elder Scrolls can't take some hints from CD Projekt Red in its quest design. For example, remember in The Witcher 3 when Geralt encounters the hunter named Nelan, who claims to have lost his wife Hannah in the woods? When Geralt goes to search for Hannah, he finds evidence of a werewolf attack, but suddenly, Hannah's sister Margaret appears and tries to bribe Geralt to call off his search. Now, Geralt can choose to do so and return to Nelan to tell him that he failed in his search, or he can ignore Margaret completely and continue with the contract. But in doing so, Geralt will encounter the werewolf and the fight will ensue. Now at the end of the fight, before finishing the werewolf off, Margaret will appear yet again and implore Geralt not to hurt Nelan. But during this exchange, it's revealed that Margaret intended to show Hannah that Nelan was actually a werewolf in hopes to scare her off, because she loved Nelan and wanted him for herself. But the plan backfired and Nelan killed his wife in bloodlust, so now Nelan's enraged at this and threatens to kill Margaret. Geralt can then allow Nelan to exact his revenge, in which case he will kill Margaret, and then find Geralt later on, asking Geralt to end his life because he knows that he's cursed and deserves to die. But alternatively, Geralt can refuse this and finish off Nelan on the spot, saving Margaret's life. Now, this kind of choice adds depth to the side quests of The Witcher 3, and while not all of the quests have that same level of depth to them, they're better written than most of the side quests in Skyrim, which more often than not simply involve go here and kill Draugr, or bring this letter to my friend on the other side of the province. It's not very compelling stuff, and the miscellaneous quest tab simply ends up being filled with a bunch of meaningless drivel that none of us really want to do, but are more or less compelled to do just for the completionist that exists in us all. So for The Elder Scrolls 6, Bethesda should really take some hints from The Witcher 3 in that quantity does not surpass nor equal quality. Give us some well thought out and well written quests that make us give a shit about the NPCs, and not just the ones who are integral to the primary questline either. Number 3. Better companions. Skyrim's biggest fault as a game of this genre is its lack of interesting characters, at least in my opinion. Most of the main characters like Delphine, Jarl Balgruuf, Ulfric Stormcloak, even Alduin himself, are painfully one-dimensional. But those are just the characters that you meet throughout the main story. The companions, no, not those ones, are where this fault really glares. You get a shit ton of companions in Skyrim. There are roughly 60 named NPCs that you can get to follow you, which in theory is a good idea, but in practice is utter shit. All of them are cardboard cutouts of more interesting characters, from Mercurio to Uthgerd the Unbroken to Janassa to Faendal. They're all the same. There's a hint of personality to each of them. For example, Janassa talks to you about how killing is an art form, almost religiously, and there's kind of hints of an interesting story to be told with a character, but you never find that out. It's just there on the surface. So this is something that Bethesda is obviously focusing on making better, as evidenced by Fallout 4. The companions in that game are so much better than what Skyrim had to offer. Characters like Piper, Kate, and Nick Valentine are way more fleshed out than previous entries in the series, save for Fallout New Vegas of course, but as we all know, that was made by Obsidian and they approach things in a different way when it comes to their game design. And I don't think any companions will top my love for characters like Cass, Veronica, and Raoul, but one can hope. Now, when it comes to the Elder Scrolls, Bethesda did start leaning towards more interesting followers with the Dawnguard DLC for Skyrim, with the character of Serana. She was a lot more fleshed out and the only character who one could even claim to be multidimensional in the entire game. She stays with you for pretty much the whole duration of the DLC's story, after you break her out of her sarcophagus, and you get to find out more about her life and her feelings about her family, as well as her status as a vampire. What I really hope to see with The Elder Scrolls 6 is something more akin to Mass Effect, though. Give us a small squad of about 10 to 15 characters, maybe that's asking for a lot, but it is just a rough guess, who are more well-rounded, well-written, have compelling backstories and interesting quests associated with them, not something like, go here and recover my lost sword and I'll literally lay down my life for you. That shit is lame and it's outdated too. And also, have them be representative of their race, but maybe subvert the player's expectations a little bit. For example, you could have a Khajiit who isn't a skooma addict, or a thief, or a caravaneer, but instead he's a seasoned warrior who hates the stereotypes that are associated with his people. Karjo would be a good base to build a character like that off of. He had potential, but again, like most characters in Skyrim, it really missed the mark. But make him a real badass knight. What about a Bosmer who still follows the Green Pact, and every time he kills a humanoid enemy in a fight, you actually see him collect the corpse and store it to eat later? And of course that would be a bit hard to code realistically, so maybe just give him a spell that he casts to remove the body from the battlefield, like how you could discard corpses in Morrowind. But also there should be dialogue between these companions when they're together. And on that note, don't allow us to have just one companion. That's unrealistic. Increase that limit to at least 2, plus one animal like a dog or a mudcrab. That way you can add dialogue as banter in between these characters, building on their personalities and on the player's appreciation for them as being fully three-dimensional. For example, you could have one character who's a staunch worshipper of the 8 divines, and another character who's a Daedra worshipper, probably a Dunmer. And they could get into arguments with one another while you're traveling together. If the first Mass Effect game could accomplish this, as well as the Dragon Age games too, with banter between characters like Garrus and Rex, Liara and Tali, there's no reason why The Elder Scrolls 6 can't do the same. Number 2. better writing and overall story. Skyrim's story was okay. It certainly wasn't anything amazing or anything to write home about. It was more or less power fantasy that didn't really commit to it. If you want more of a breakdown on that, I'd suggest going to watch Zarek Zahakaron's video on the subject over on his channel. But the writing here is really substandard. For example, you start off the game as a prisoner, just like the last two games in the series, and you find out that you're the Dragonborn of Legend pretty much at the start of the game. Now, of course, you're not required to go see Jarl Balgruuf in Whiterun and start the main quest immediately, but if you do so, you kill the dragon that was attacking the tower outside the city, absorb its soul, and then head on your way up the 7,000 steps about 30 minutes into playing. But even though you find this out so quickly, nobody really respects you as the Dragonborn except for the Greybeards. The Thanes treat you like a common mercenary, the College of Winterhold doesn't give a shit that you've mastered the Thu'um, and dragons more often than not get slaughtered by city guards before you can even join in the fight. It doesn't really feel like you're the Dragonborn. It just feels like we got access to some cool spells that you could shoot out of your mouth instead of your hands. Even the final boss fight with Alduin, the world-eating dragon who is supposed to devour time and supposedly can't be killed, is a walk in the park compared to some of the other dragons you fight in the game, or even Karstag, who's the most difficult enemy in all of Skyrim, and he's just the ghost of a frost giant. My point is that if The Elder Scrolls 6 is going to go for that power fantasy again, make us truly feel like we're in that role. Either commit all the way, or don't bother at all. But besides that, as previously mentioned, the miscellaneous quests are lame and boring, but the guild quests are actually not that bad, save for the College of Winterhold. When it comes to the different guilds, the Dark Brotherhood quest is more or less fine, but for Kinnereth's sake, can we just have one Elder Scrolls game where the Dark Brotherhood doesn't get murdered in the end? Just let all the characters survive just once. Even if you have to kill off just one character, leave the rest alive. When it comes to the Thieves Guild, don't make us do an insane amount of Radiant quests in each city in the game in order to re-establish the guild's presence. And if you do, please don't make the location for each Radiant quest random. That was the worst part of the Thieves Guild quest line. You couldn't become the guild master until you did that, and that was some bullshit. Overall, the Daedric quests I didn't have too much trouble with. They were actually probably the best parts of all of Skyrim, but maybe give us a bit more lore on them. For example, we get glimpses of Nocturnal's realm and Sanguine's realm in Skyrim. Why not give us a chance to explore the realms of some of the lesser Daedric princes, like Periite or Malakath? Just make it interesting. Number 1. Less bugs. The bugs. Good God, the bugs. Please fix them. If it's one thing that at least Bethesda knows about and Todd Howard acknowledged in their E3 conference, it's that their games are so fucking buggy. Now admittedly, I've encountered fewer bugs in Fallout 4 than I have in Skyrim, but rest assured they're still there. And when you're making a game that's as massive as the games that Bethesda makes are, there's no doubt going to be some bugs. It's ultimately inevitable, and we as gamers should accept that. You're not going to find every single bug in every game that you make. But it's incredibly infuriating when the kill cam freezes and I end up getting attacked while my character just stands there getting mauled to death by a bear. And it's even more infuriating when a quest shows up in my journal that I can't actually complete because the game just decided to fuck with me. It's bullshit, and this stuff has got to stop. You've got a lot of years ahead of you, Bethesda, to make a game that can be truly great, and is no doubt going to reach unprecedented levels of hype too. But don't subvert that hype. I don't care if I have to wait for a few extra months or a year to play this game after everything is done. Just please playtest the shit out of this game and make it as smooth of an experience as possible. Well, that concludes this video. Of course, these are just my personal ideas and opinions, and I don't expect everybody to adhere to them or to agree, nor do I expect Bethesda to actually do these things for their next game. That is entirely dependent upon the studio and the time that goes into the development of the game. But if you have ideas for what you would like to see in the next Elder Scrolls game, then please feel free to leave a comment. But until then, I will see you next time. Peace.